One time at lunch, this mathematician, astronomer, physicist guy, Edmund Halley, was talking to his buddies Christopher Wren and Robert Hooke about the laws of planetary motion. Robert Hooke was an inventor and pioneer of microscopy. Christopher Wren was an astronomer and famous architect of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. So Halley was like, hey, I think that the attraction between planets decreases in an inverse proportion to the square of the distance between them. We call this the inverse square law today. Hooke and Wren were like, hey, that's what we think so too. So they knew that the planets traveled in an ellipse, but none of them could derive it and describe it mathematically. Actually, Hooke claimed that he not only derived the inverse square law, but all the laws of planetary motion. But Wren was unconvinced and was like, well, I'll put 2 weeks worth of wage into a wager for whoever brings me that math. Hooke was given time but never produced the paper, saying some BS like, well, if I just told you the answer, it would rob you of the satisfaction of figuring it out yourself. So Halley, still consumed with finding the answer, was like, I'm gonna go see that guy Newton about it in Cambridge, see if he can help me out. When they got there, Halley was like, hey Newton, what shape do you think the orbit of the planets and the sun would take if they followed the inverse square law? Newton replied immediately, oh, it would be an ellipse. And Halley was like, how do you know that? And Newton replied with something like, well, I calculated it a long time ago when I was into that sort of thing, I just didn't tell anybody about it. But he looked and he couldn't find the paper amongst all the rest of his papers. Halley pressed him to redo the calculations, and 3 months later, Newton published the 9-page paper on the motion of bodies in orbit. After that, Newton retired for 2 years of highly concentrated, intensive reflection. He didn't do any alchemy for 2 years, and his secretary said he was neglecting his sleep, food, and the state of his clothing. Sometimes he'd be out walking in his garden, have a thought, and have to run in to write it down without even sitting. He came out of it with his masterpiece, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica. Principia is one of the most important scientific writings ever penned, or quilled? Probably quilled. And Halley paid for its publication because the Royal Society didn't want to, and Newton didn't pay for it either.